Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Fraud Fighters Unplugged. And today I'm honored and privileged to have one of my colleagues at Arcos Labs, Patrice Boffa, who's our Chief Customer Officer, and really at the tip of the spear with respect to our customers, join us and talk through this. So Patrice, great to have you here. Welcome. Exciting to talk about our topics today. Quick introduction.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks for having me here. Definitely excited to be here. As you mentioned, like Arcos, we protect a lot of the major brands, and big part of what I run is like our security operations center, when we protect our customers and we see a little bit of everything that's going on, and also like the trends that we can anticipate that are going to happen in the future. And I think that's what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so cool to have you, Patrice, because you really live at the nexus of what we see. This episode is exciting for me, and I'll remind everybody throughout the episode, if you have questions for Patrice or me about the topics, DM either one of us on LinkedIn. We'll make sure to either get back to you directly with answers or include it in a future episode. So that's an exciting way to kind of get feedback. But Patrice, this one's really exciting because we're talking about streaming platforms and the downstream effect of what these platforms have to deal with when they really sponsor and present large content. We just had Argentina and Spain win their respective tournaments in Europe and in the US, in America. We're about to have the world's largest every 4-year sporting event in Paris coming up in August. We have World Cups. We have all kinds of things where we have this great nexus of people coming to these platforms. And then not to mention, obviously, the political year here in the US, the November elections, the Republican National Committee, the Democratic National Committee, the news we saw on the weekend. These are all focal points for platforms to stream content and attract new customers to their platforms. And that raises some really interesting challenges. And the challenge is, how do these platforms protect themselves? And what are the downstream impacts of being compromised, both to the challenge, both to the platform, to the content, and potentially other people involved in that supply chain as consumers try to consume that content or visit those events? So that's a mouthful, a lot to unpack there, but maybe start with the downstream impact of all this, and then we'll deal at the second part of this with how to protect ourselves.
Yeah, I think the downstream impact is obviously a lot of those companies have paid like major rights to have access to broadcast those events, and obviously they're trying to capitalize on it. So you have to create an account, you have to pay for it. So that's really the goal. You want to protect those. On the other side, you also have like all those dark side providers that are trying to provide kind of like a similar experience, but that are not those brands that have the proper rights. So every time you're going to try to go for a cheap access to a streaming event, you put your credentials at risk. Someone is going to store them, they're going to resell it, they're going to do something with it that is not good. That's the reason why obviously Arcos protect like all the major brands that stream like the large majority of those events. And we always recommend people to trust the major brands. Even if you're attracted by, hey, here's like a cheap streaming provider, something that a brand that you never heard of, Don't go there, because you cannot trust what they're going to do with your personal information. I think that's kind of like the number one tip that we have here.
Yeah, it's interesting, Patrice. It's always the case, is that when it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. To that point, I have a family member that was telling me this week about an event that they were at. They had a tenant who, unbeknownst to them, was Airbnb-ing their own apartment. So it was their apartment they were leasing, and then they were trying to vacation rental this thing. Obviously, Airbnb had great controls and was able to stop it. But to your point, if you're on a secondary or third platform it's cheap, they're not real controls around it, you really run the risk of, not just credential compromise, but literally abusing that asset, where somebody moves in or shows up and finds out, hey, I'm here for the game, and there is no apartment available, right? I simply walked into a left hook. So I think
we're seeing that quite a lot, because all those events, there is obviously people watching online, there's people that are going to be traveling, so all the traveling platforms trying to buy like tickets, trying to rent apartments on those marketplaces, or even like we talk a lot about travel lately, people doing like the points, trying to steal points as well. So it's behind the event, we have to look at the whole ecosystem and everyone that's going to be there and try to enjoy either traveling in person, watching online, and those are all the potential downstream effects that all the fraudsters are trying to take advantage of. There is a major event going on, you're trying to hide, you're trying to maximize your profits by doing malicious things, and that's the right moment. So this summer, as you mentioned, we have all those events going on, which is kind of like fraudsters paradise, and that's what we keep telling everyone, be ready for it, because it is going to get nasty.
Yeah, it's interesting, Patrice, because it's not just a fraudster's paradise, but also if you're a commercial enterprise trying to attract customers, it's such a lucrative opportunity. All the eyeballs are centered on one event. And think of even the promotion abuse. If you sign up for an account or maybe sign up for a new cell plan, you get access to this content provider. And oftentimes there's, $50, $60, $100 promotions available. Imagine the impact of somebody illegitimately signing up at scale using bots for those accounts and then federating the awards and the access to the content. To your point, it's not simply that the organization involved in providing the content is losing licensing revenue. It's also the fact that the promotion abuse is happening, and the downstream impact is significant. Maybe speak, Patrice, to the impact of crime as a service, because this sounds complicated, but in point of fact, it's really not that hard for these people to be able to take these opportunities and take advantage of them. So maybe talk about that before we talk about how to protect ourselves.
Yeah, and I will say that's a big change that we saw in the last couple of years. Like 2 years ago, if you want to take advantage to do fraud at scale for those events, you had to go into the dark web. You had to be a very technical person. You had to pretty much buy the tools, stitch them themselves together, make them scale. Where today we have those crime as a service platforms. They really operate like any SaaS company. You can Google them. You're never going to realize that they're like malicious companies. They look like totally legit. They have support pages, status pages, and you can pretty much go there, swipe your credit card. Usually not. It's usually crypto or PayPal accounts. That's a good hint to know if they're legit or not. And you can pretty much buy and deploy those tools online and start pretty much doing damage. To your point, creating accounts, try to do credential stuffing, like everything at scale. You can now do it with those crime as a service platforms that are really a SaaS company. They are just a third party providing tools and allowing you to do damage.
Yeah, it's interesting. Everything you just said, in addition to that, guarantees and refunds if their service delivery isn't great. So it really is a business ecosystem. So in light of that, Patrice, let's kind of punctuate this episode with, what are the things that platforms can do to protect themselves, and what should consumers do to protect themselves against the obviously high risk environment that these big events present?
Yeah, I think obviously as a company, you have to implement strong controls, knowing what's going on, make sure that you know your customers, what are their behaviors, that you monitor the transactions, that you have a solid response plan, because you know that at any point in time, something's going to go wrong. We have seen the news in the past couple of weeks. A lot of companies got affected by breaches. Having a plan to respond is very important. And then obviously at a more personal level is make sure that you monitor your financial transactions in your accounts. You want to know where your credentials are going to be using. Make sure that you protect your personal information. As I say, don't trust third parties, sites that you never heard of. Too good to be true. Usually it's a risk right there. It's a red flag. So don't do that as well. Be very cautious with your emails, the links, your social networks. Social engineering is everywhere, so be very cautious about any of your personal information that you're going to share in any platform. Like that's really like the number one key reminder for consumers.
Yeah, it's so interesting, Patrice. You're so right. At the platform level, anticipate inordinate volumes, and so the imperative of understanding whether that interaction is legitimate or it's someone pretending to be a human being or a robot. The bot attacks. You should assume that these are happening at scale, as you said. Just in the last couple of weeks, the hundreds of millions of records that have been breached, those are all going to be stuffed into bots and attacking sites. And if you're a business, again, look for things like one-time password codes, where SMS toll fraud is brought to the equation, where someone goes, hey, I'm trying to log into my account, I forgot. Doing that at scale from high value countries where the SMS toll is significant, that's an issue. And then to your point on the consumer side, if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. And third-party sites that are offering enormous discounts are probably not a great idea. So everybody, to Patrice's point, keep an eye on your financial transactions through your apps. Look at what's happening in your bank accounts. Be careful where you share information. And for those businesses out there that are really anticipating the volumes that we're going to see from these great events, summer sporting events, geopolitical events, the national political situation here in the U.S., as we go through an election, all of those things are going to drive enormous amounts of eyeballs to these platforms. Be careful that you have some mechanism to uniquely and carefully distinguish between volumetric bad attacks and actual people that are legitimate customers trying to benefit from the content. With that, everybody, be on the lookout, be diligent, enjoy the content, and as always, we stand ready to serve here at Arcos Labs. All the best.